This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Logan Simon, K-State Extension agronomist, starts today's show as he previews a few cotton pests that Kansas growers could currently be seeing, and one that hasn't quite made its way to Kansas. Kansas Forest Service's Ryan Armbrust and Chester Hubbard continue the show as they discuss the Map My Property tool and how landowners can use this resource. Ending the show is K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk as he looks at the best management practices for harvesting corn silage. In particular, he says the two most important factors are whole plant moisture and kernel depth. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our show discussing what is being monitored in cotton in Kansas with K-State Extension agronomist Logan Simon. Logan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Shelby.
Logan, as we're thinking about what things should be monitored in cotton this time of year for entomology insects, what is the first one on your list?
Absolutely. So right now, as cotton across the state of Kansas has made its way into squaring, those early squares are very important for us to be protecting, as they are the number one makers of mature, high-quality cotton for our cotton acres in southern Kansas and northern Oklahoma. At this stage, we really need to be watching for some specific insects that are big feeders on those little developing squares. Namely, we're going to be thinking about what we call in alfalfa a lygus bug, or our cotton producers are more likely to know them as tarnished plant bugs or just plant bugs, as well as cotton fleahoppers. We want to be watching these right now very closely as they produce that similar injury in the form of blasted squares, where we lose those fruiting positions right now, those early developing fruiting positions, which can have a profound impact on our final yield and certainly the ultimate grade of that cotton, as our highest quality, most mature cotton bolls are those first ones to form.
How do they blast the squares?
So they're going to be feeding on the squares. So they'll feed on those little squares. And when we call them blasted, simply that means they're missing. So they'll start feeding. But basically, when we think about scouting for these and we're looking for those lost squares, basically looking at those positions on our fruiting branches where we would expect the presence of a square, a small floral bud, we're looking for places where they are missing. So that you'll see a little scar left over where that bud, that square, was attached to the plant, and it will be missing. And we refer to those as blasted squares.
Do the fleahopper and lygus bug, or what more cotton growers know as the plant bug, work together? Are they in the field at the same time, or do they just happen to do a similar damage to the plant?
So they could be out there. Fleahoppers are going to be less problematic than plant bugs. We're more often looking for plant bugs. The damage that they cause is going to be the same, though. So in both circumstances, we may be looking for both insects. But the big thing that we're looking for is the loss of those early fruiting positions. When those squares are missing, that's a sign that we likely have plant bug feeding, or potentially, though less frequently, an issue in Kansas, cotton fleahopper.
What do they look like?
So when we're looking for these, we'll start out talking about plant bugs. So our tarnished plant bug, they're going to be approximately 1/4 inch long and about 1/8 of an inch wide. Flat, yellowish brown bodies, a little bit of reddish brown, black mottling across them. They're going to be most distinct. They'll have a yellow Y-shaped marking on them, and that's going to kind of give away that you are looking at a tarnished plant bug. So that mottled color and then the yellow Y. This differs from our fleahoppers. Fleahoppers are going to be about 1/8 of an inch long, and they have yellowish green bodies. They're oval shaped. They're fairly flat as well. Their bodies are pretty flattened, similar to a plant bug. They may have a few dark spots around the rear and the upper surface. The nymphs, if we're looking for nymphs of the fleahopper, they might not be quite as dark green, so they'll be smaller in general. They'll be smaller in size and kind of a white to light green color when they're in those early nymphal stages. Fairly small insects, both of them.
With these small insects, for people scouting their fields, are they just looking for the damage on the plants, or should they also be looking for these insects?
So when we are going out there, some things that we would recommend would be, so you can use the sweep net method or potentially a drop cloth. If we're looking for fleahoppers, we're going to be looking for thresholds of about 20 to 40 fleahoppers per 100 terminals. And when we're looking at terminals, we're talking about those upper portions of new growth in the cotton. So 20 to 40 fleahoppers per 100 terminals. So that's a pretty high threshold, and one of the reasons why we don't tend to necessarily reach that. Coupled with those presence of the fleahoppers in the 100 terminals, we would also be looking for about 10 to 15% blasted squares. If we're doing a sweep net approach, we would be looking for 1 to maybe 1.5 fleahoppers per 10 sweeps. And then if we were looking at more drop cloth, that'd be like 1 to 3 fleahoppers per foot a row. If we're batting those plants and getting those insects to fall off. When we're thinking about thresholds for the plant bug as they compare to fleahoppers, we're going to take those thresholds and kind of divide them by 3. When we think about the relative impact of a plant bug versus a fleahopper, it's about 3 times the impact compared to a fleahopper. So in that way, if we are, say, doing looking at those terminals, instead of looking for 25 to 40 fleahoppers per 100 terminals, it would only take about a third that number to hit the threshold in the case of your tarnished plant bugs.
If they are reaching those thresholds, what management options do they have?
Yeah, so we really want to be mindful, of course, when we talk about chemical control of insects in cotton. We want to be mindful that we are not making that call unless we are absolutely sure that this is the insect causing the injury and we have definitely hit that threshold. Unnecessary insecticide applications in cotton has a significant chance of killing beneficial insects that could cause flare-ups of other insects down the road. That could be problematic. So first off, I want to start with that caveat of we're very cautious before we pull that trigger. Make sure we definitely know what we're looking at. We have a lot of different insecticide options for control in the case of both fleahoppers and plant bugs. I would really encourage folks to refer to the 2026 Cotton Insect Pest Management Guide from K-State Research and Extension, the bookstore, as it gives a full list of all of our different products that are available for the use in these two. We have a whole line of products that are effective for use. And so just thinking about local availability and cost of that product, we have a number of effective treatments out there. I always recommend that folks be mindful of looking for something that is going to be as mild on those beneficials as possible. So when possible, we would definitely want to use a product that's going to provide an acceptable level of control for these pests while minimizing detrimental effects on our beneficial insects.
And the fleahopper and lygus bug, something we have seen in Kansas cotton, but something we haven't yet seen in cotton in Kansas, but want to make note of to our producers, the cotton Jassid. And what is this pest?
Cotton Jassid is a new emerging pest of U.S. cotton. It came into the Cotton Belt in 2025, first originating out of Florida and having a really significant effect on cotton acres, basically from South Carolina through Georgia over into Alabama. Significant potential effects on U.S. cotton. By the end of the season, we did see cotton Jassid identified in a couple of counties in East Texas. However, none of those cases was cotton jassid found on cotton. Cotton jassid actually is going to prefer anything that falls into the mallow family. So that includes not only cotton, but also things like okra, or more often than not, we've actually been finding it a lot on ornamental hibiscus. So a couple of cases that we have seen so far closer to Kansas just this year were some cases of where we have found cotton jassid on some ornamental hibiscus in plant nurseries in South Texas. They appear to be coming in as we're importing those ornamental flowers from other areas. So we do have a couple of modes with which this insect is moving around. Like I say, though, it was first identified in 2025. Here in 2026, we continue to intensively scout for it because it can have a pretty profound effect on the cotton plant.
And can you just let us know, what does this look like?
Yeah, so adult jassids are small. Again, one of those insects that's about 1/8 of an inch in length. This one is wedge-shaped and pale green in its body. The distinguishing feature for a cotton jassid, and remember, this is a leafhopper, so as we're out also looking for potentially the corn leafhopper, the distinguishing factor here for a cotton jassid is the presence of two black spots on the back end of the forewing. If we see those two very distinct black spots on those wings of these leafhoppers, that is a real telltale sign that you're looking at a two-spotted cotton leafhopper, the cotton jassid.
Logan, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thanks for having me on, Shelby.
That was K-State Extension agronomist Logan Simon. I will link resources to these articles and the management guide that he referenced in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show discussing the Map My Property tool from the Kansas Forest Service. And then to talk about it, we're joined by Chester Hubbard, Geographic Information Systems Analyst with the Kansas Forest Service, and Ryan Armbrust, Rural Forestry Program Coordinator for the Kansas Forest Service. Ryan, Chester, I appreciate you both taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us, Shelby.
Yeah, more happy to be here.
Chester, what is the Map My Property tool?
So the Map My Property tool is an online map app or a web tool that folks can kind of go on and observe data that the Kansas Forest Service has, like our tree canopy data, or along with our wildfire perimeters, and they can use that to view property, kind of view land, along with some other features in there, like soil data that we have that has some tree recommendations that was developed by some of our other employees. Can't exactly remember who all had hands on that one. But yeah, so just a lot of our in-house data that it's helpful for the public to have access to, along with just kind of the ability to draw features.
And giving more access to, per se, the public of some of your resources, is that why you chose to develop the tool?
Yeah, I was inspired by Texas A&M. They have a very similar tool that you can do a lot of the same things with. And so I was like, well, if Texas has that, why not us? And so after I kind of had that mindset, I talked with Ryan and a couple other folk, and that kind of really got the ball rolling.
And Ryan, how did you contribute some of your knowledge into this project?
Yeah, so one thing I've observed over the years of working with landowners in Kansas is that maps are always a great way to start a conversation about what have you got, what do you want to do. I love maps myself. I've never found a landowner yet that doesn't get absorbed in looking at a map of their property, especially with new information on there about where something is or where something was. It's a great way to start that conversation. And that's primarily what we do within the rural forestry program here is we sit down at the kitchen table with a landowner and help them understand what opportunities they have. They tell us what they're trying to accomplish. And this is a great conversation starter. It's not something we use to, plan comprehensive specific practices for them. But it's really a great way to start to, understand what they've got. And it doesn't really require, the way that Chester built this tool, it doesn't really require a lot of technical expertise on the part of a landowner to use. You pull up the website, you find your property, you can draw on there, make a couple notes, click on the soils data, and it's going to give you some information about what kind of trees and shrubs might do well there. That's not sort of the end of that conversation, but it's a great way to start that conversation.
So, Chester, how did you go about building this to be something that is really useful for those landowners?
Well, I just I was going into it with the mindset of making sure that's a quick hidden tool and all that. Just make sure that it can be a quick reference tool to look at data, look at features, look at be able to draw things like polygons and points and put down notes. And so when I was kind of thinking about that, I was like, well, for me, like it's all kind of that's my job. I make maps all day. I have a super cool job. So I'm really proficient at that, but I had to go in the mindset of, like if I'm a landowner who's never even really heard of GIS and oh or has never really drawn a map or anything, like how would I be able to make a tool that could be easily accessible? And so just kind of make sure that I develop a tool that could be easily understood was kind of one of my guiding points for that. Along with, I also include a detailed guide into the tool as well. There's a document in there. There's like an initial pop-up, and there's just a button that'll take you to a document, and you'll be able to kind of go through it, and hopefully provide some understanding for folks.
Can you explain to us what is the purpose of being able to draw on this map?
So, I mean, there's kind of a lot of different things, kind of a lot of different purposes. It could be just as simple as, you have something cool on your property. Like, back where I come from, Carbondale, Kansas, Osage County, the Santa Fe Trail used to run through there. So I've told Ryan this plenty of times, but there's still wagon ruts out there. So if there's a landowner out there and they're like, I want a map where the wagon ruts are, like they could put down some notes, like some nodes, maybe some points, maybe even some lines, or just a polygon for the general area where it may be. So there's that one application. Then there's a application where if they're thinking about doing some tree canopy work with the Kansas Forest Service, they can make an initial map for our foresters, or even if our our foresters can also use this tool just as a quick resource for themselves, just to kind of make a little reference map for when they do a landowner visit. There's also included in this, there's a wildfire perimeter. So if a landowner that was affected by the Ranger Road fires said, hey, I kind of had a lot of land burned up this past spring. And they kind of want to make a map of their property and where the fire might burn through. They can do that as well. There's other if they want to make a map for resource or conservation work with any of the other state agencies or federal agencies. They can make a map for that. Like there's a lot of applications that could be done for this or with this tool.
Is this something you've seen other rural forestry people or people that are rural landowners using this tool?
The tool's pretty brand new, but the concept behind it, I think, is old. We've seen sometimes landowners pull out just a printed aerial photograph and make some pencil notes on it and say, I'm thinking of putting in a cross fence here, or I want to exclude cattle from browsing in this area because I want oak regeneration to happen down there. Or they might say, I think I'd like to take out all this hackberry here and have some black walnut and oaks or whatever down here. And the ability to sort of maybe have this, these notes taken on a GIS online map and then print it out and take it in the field, I think really helps guide that conversation in a way that maybe helps us get started helping people sooner. Because we've got a lot of landowners that are really, well aware of limitations of their property and what they'd like to do. And if this can help sort of collect their thoughts to better communicate to whether it's a wildlife biologist with Wildlife and Parks, or a soil conservationist with NRCS, or the forester you might talk to with us, with the Kansas Forest Service, this way of helping get that conversation sort of focused a little bit beforehand so they can better communicate what they want to do. Again, whether it's with a natural resource professional or just a contractor they've got to come out and do some work, hopefully that's a helpful tool for them to have, because we know that, a paper map and a pencil, and some walking around knowledge has been how that conversation started in the past. And if we can help improve on that with, additional good data layers, I think that's a service we're happy to provide to landowners, whether they're working with us or not.
Any dreams for this tool moving forward or tools like it?
I'll just jump in and say I've already told Chester of 3 or 4 cool things I think we could plug into this, and we're trying to refine that by what additional information is going to be most useful to a landowner, not just interesting stuff we could cram in there. So we've got some stuff on the horizon we're talking about. I won't, sort of spoil it by naming anything yet, but I think we're going to continue to work on this, especially if we can get some feedback from landowners and natural resource folks to say, hey, if you threw that data in there, I think it'd really help us.
Brian hit a lot of what I was going to say there, but I mean, I'll kind of talk maybe about some future plan, like data plans for ourselves, like like the tree canopy data layer that's in there right now. It was created about almost a decade ago now, or it is a decade now. And so we're working on creating a new tree canopy data layer so that it could be a better reference point for landowners. Because I mean, tree canopy can change in a decade, I imagine. So there may be some points, some areas where people look at the map and like, that's not right. It says there's tree canopy here or there's not tree canopy here due to flooding, wildfires, any type of reason. And then they contact me and I'm like, then I'll have to give the whole spiel about it being a decade old again. But so just being able to update the data, and that's in the plans. And like Ryan said, we have. I have plans to work with all the different programs to make more tools that are available for the public to use.
If people are wanting to find the Map My Property tool, how can they do that?
Well, they can go to our website, kansasforest.org, right, Ryan?
It is, kansasforests.org.
It's it's available on there, and folks can find it on there fairly easily. I'm also, if you type in Kansas Forest Service, Map My Property tool, into Google, I believe it'll pop up. Who knows with Google searches sometimes. Sometimes you get random things that aren't exactly related to what you want.
Chester, Ryan, I appreciate both taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That was GIS analyst with the Kansas Forest Service, Chester Hubbard, and he was joined by Rural Forestry Program Coordinator for the Kansas Forest Service, Ryan Armbrust, as they discussed the Map My Property tool. I will link it in today's show notes on agtoday.net, or you'd also be able to navigate to it by going to the Kansas Forest website, which is kansasforest.org. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead.
Welcome back to Agriculture Today. Along with Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. We end today's program with this week's milk lines. As producers get set to harvest corn silage, K-State dairy specialist Mike Brouk discusses the importance of whole plant moisture and kernel depth. He says the goal before cutting is for whole plant moisture to be 35 to 38% dry matter, and kernel depth should be around 80% hard starch and 20% milk.
Today I'd like to visit with our Kansas dairy producers concerning the upcoming corn silage harvest. Here in central Kansas, most of our corn has been actually tasseled for a few weeks now, so as we think about silage harvest, it's really upon us probably 2 to 4 weeks from now. It really depends on just how much rain we continue to get as well as how hot it is, and if it turns off hot and dry here in the next few weeks, it'll speed that harvest time up. So many of the questions I get this time of year is, when should we pull the trigger and when should we actually start chopping our corn for corn silage? There's 2 things you really need to evaluate. One is whole plant moisture, and then the other is actual kernel depth. We're looking for a balance between the two. Ideally, we'd like to keep the whole plant moisture to a point that we have no more than 38% dry matter. Our goal would be somewhere to be between 35 and 38% on a whole plant dry matter content before we actually chop. Now, the other thing we need to think about is the depth of the starch in the kernel. So our ideal probably would be about 80% milk line, or in other words, 80% of the kernel depth has hard starch and only about 20% of the kernel depth has milk. And we want to definitely do it before we reach black layer. Keeping in mind that as we get closer to black layer, it's more important to make sure we pay very close attention to kernel processing to make sure that we are crushing those kernels so they get maximum benefit from the starch that is in there. As we look at the reason for that, what we're trying to do is we're trying to maximize the amount of starch that we actually find in the corn silage, keeping in mind that about 25% of the total starch in the kernel is going to develop from the time we're about 1/2 milk line through black layer, the complete development of the starch. The other common question I get this time of year is, so how fast is it going to dry down? If you're out there pulling samples and checking the dry matter content of the corn silage, let's say you harvest 3 to 5 stalks, you chop them up, and you've determined that the dry matter content of that sample is 30%. So how long will it be before I might reach 35% dry matter? Well, it really depends on weather conditions. It's probably somewhere between 5 and 10 days from now. Generally, we would figure on losing about 0.5% to maybe 1% moisture each day, depending, again, on how hot and dry it is. We have extremely high temperatures and a lot of wind. We might even lose moisture at a little quicker rate than 1% per day, but those would be very unusual conditions in which we might see that happen. So that'll give you just some sort of guideline as to how long it might be, but you need to continually monitor the moisture content every few days once we hit 30% dry matter. And of course, if we have rain events during that time, that will force some additional moisture into the corn and slow its drying process down as well, but maybe not as many days as you might think. So again, as we think about corn silage harvest, 2 things that you need to keep in mind. Number 1 would be the dry matter content of the whole plant. And again, you want to hit that 35 to 38% level for dry matter, as well as at least 80% starch development in the kernel depth and about 20% milk. This is Mike Brouk with K-State Research and Extension.
Thanks, Mike. And this reminder to listen anytime or to catch up on past programs, go to agtoday.net or using a podcast app on your mobile device, type in these search keywords, Agriculture, Today, Kansas, and you'll find this program. Then tap on the subscribe button. And that'll do it for this edition of Agriculture Today. For Shelby Varner, I'm Jeff Wickman. This is the K-State Radio Network.